Hi, I'm Matt with etrailer. If you're trying to get a little bit more stability out of your camper for your jacks, then I recommend checking out the SnapPad SnapJack Scissor Jack Pads. Now today we are going to be putting this on our 2016 Dutchmen Kodiak, but this will fit on any RV camper, and it's really just going to depend on what type of jacks you have. So let's check it out. Now this is going to come in a set of 4. We're going to have 2 for a front side and 2 for a back side, but they're all going to install exactly the same. And some situations you might find yourself needing something like this for is mostly if you're in some more uneven terrain areas or slippery terrain areas. So uneven terrain areas would be maybe you're on a slope or maybe you're on some gravel or grass. Some things that aren't going to be like concrete that are going to give you that really nice stable surface. And what's really nice about these is since we do have that rubber construction for the outside, it's going to prevent you from slipping all over the place. There's going to be also some other benefits of having this rubber material around our pad, because the pad itself is made out of steel, and so it's going to be very strong, very durable, and it's going to last you a long time. But this rubber is going to help it even last longer, because what's going to happen is once you're using this, and let's say maybe you're not going off to the campsite a lot, or if you are, it does have some concrete or some type of pavement on the ground. If you have this metal pad that's constantly making contact with that ground, it's going to eventually start to wear away, especially on that powder coat finish you have. And then once that finish starts to fade out, it's going to be more prone to rusting. Something else I do like about that rubber is also going to help protect the ground. So if you are parking this at home and you like to make sure your driveway looks pretty clean, well, if you just have a metal pad on the ground making contact, it's probably going to scratch up that surface. This is going to help reduce that and not scratch anything up. Now, in my opinion, I think this is going to be a great option, especially compared to what comes stock on your vehicle, because that's going to be a lot more surface area. It's going to give you overall a better parking experience. Now, in my opinion, for the actual installation part of it, that can kind of vary. It's going to mainly depend on the status of your jack. Now, the ones we have today are going to be some older ones that have seen a lot of journeys. And installing was a little bit tricky. On one side more than the other, you might have to go about a couple different approaches. I do talk about those approaches in the video. But if you are curious to see what that process looks like, just stay tuned and we'll walk you through it. To begin the installation, I'm going to lay everything out. And we're going to have 2 different types of hardware. One's going to be for your 5,000 pound, another one's going to be for your 2,500 pound jack. So depending on which one you have, you'll be able to tell. But I'll go a little bit more over that later on. But up front, we're going to have the snap pads themselves, their hardware, and I'm going to recommend grabbing a few things. So I'm going to recommend grabbing a rubber mallet, just tap those bolts loose if need be, and some masking tape to help keep the jack together once you remove its original foot. Now, we are going to have some other tools, some wrenches and some socket wrenches, but I'll talk about the sizes once we get a little bit more in depth with this. The first thing I recommend doing is just chalking your camper, just to be safe. Then after that, just lower your jack to about where it's the same height with this snap pad. You just kind of want to roughly line up those holes. If it's a little bit too high, too low, that's fine. You can adjust later on. Next, we want to figure out if we have the 5,000 or 2,500 pound jack. And if you don't know right off the bat, you can also just check your hardware. If your hardware is a little bit larger, then you're going to be using a 5/8 and 11/16 tools. Now, if your hardware is a little bit smaller, that's going to be for the 2,500 pound jack. And you're going to be using a 1/2 inch socket and wrench to remove it. You can always just come by with your tools, just check, make sure it gets, you're going to remove it. If you can, you should be good. Also keep in mind that these sizes can vary if you have a different type of jack. So definitely watch out for that. If they are on the larger side, probably be using the 5/8. Now there's 2 different ways of doing this. The first way is we can use masking tape to hold this in place. And the second way is we're not going to use the masking tape and we'll just put one arm on at a time once we replace the foot. Now, I actually have tried this a couple different ways, and it's going to depend on your situation. So if you find that these arms fit pretty tightly in the feet or the snap pad, then I'd recommend just doing one arm at a time. But if your arms just kind of slide into place into the foot, then I'd recommend using masking tape. Now I'm just going to try to use some masking tape real quick. If it works this way, it's going to make my life a little bit easier. If it doesn't, then we can just simply take off the tape. Once you have both sides taped down, because you want to make sure this is secured, then we can go on to the next step, and that's going to be removing our hardware. Once that's on, you're just going to take this 5/8. That's going to go on the actual bolt itself, and then you're going to use the 11/16 for the locking nut behind it. Just going to take that off. You're eventually going to reach a point where these nuts are going to be able to come off, and you could remove these bolts. Now, sometimes they'll move out pretty easy. They won't give you a whole lot of fight. Sometimes they might struggle a bit for you. If that's the case, grab that rubber mallet, just give it a tap. It'll pop right out. Something else we want to keep an eye out is for if you have this spacer. For different jacks, they're going to look different, and some jacks might not even have one. So you'll notice it just in the center of here. I'm just going to put mine off to the side. You will reuse this, so keep it handy. And now I'm just going to remove this foot. There's a little bit of resistance to it, but it's nothing too much. I might try to slide it out this way. Push that out on the side. And now we're going to just try to get this snap pad into place. It's already looking pretty low, so I'm just going to raise this up a bit. Try to get everything lined up. So right now I'm liking the way this is going on. It's not feeling too tight. So we might get to keep the masking tape on. I like to come over to the side of it, try to get level, see how well it's going to line up. And after a fair amount of adjusting, we're able to get it through. Because these are, we don't want to have to be pretty lined up, pretty perfect. I still like to come by with that rubber mallet. I beat it in the rest of the way. Now before we put that second bolt in, the trick is we want to put the spacer in. We want to put pressure against one side. Yours might be a little bit different. Yours might have holes in it, so you probably want to put the spacer in first. But if you have a one like this, then we're going to just stick it in here. Apply pressure with my finger and try to keep it level. Then I'm going to grab this second bolt, push this through. I might have to wiggle a little bit. Looks like it's getting through there. Probably give it a tap with the mallet. It's holding that spacer up now. Might come back over here, check things, make sure nothing's getting a little out of sorts. Come over here, make sure everything's looking level. We are looking a little bit off. So what I'm going to do is just going to apply pressure to this pad from one side. And this will help you out a lot more if you have a friend nearby. But if you don't, you just work with it a bit. You'll be able to get it through. Now we're going to grab those lock nuts. We're going to hand thread them into place. They'll eventually get to a point where they stop. Once these are on, we're going to grab our 5/8 wrench and an 11/16 socket and tighten these on. I like to start from the nut side. And you just keep going until you get a decent amount of tension. Next up, you just have to torque it down to what the specs are in the owner's manual. After when we're done with this, we're going to do two things. First, I'm going to take off this tape. We won't need this anymore, hopefully. Now I just recommend try trying this out, make sure your jack is still going to operate correctly. So what we're really watching out for is to make sure we don't have any binding occurring. You're going to get some binding occurring if things aren't completely flush to one another. So as we saw earlier, how those arms are going to stick and grab onto each other, that's why we taped them, because there's going to be these little gaps that go right into each other. And if those aren't lined up completely, you're probably going to get some funky movements when you're using your jack. But right now, I'm not getting that at all. This is moving pretty smoothly. I just recommend going up and down a few times to make sure everything's operating correctly. But that'll do it for our look at some of the features and the installation of the SnapPad SnapJack pads on our 2016 Dutchmen Kodiak. I'm Matt. Thanks for watching.